Why did the Red Army, desperate for an off-road reconnaissance vehicle, spend years building Frankenstein's monsters from scraps of old machines and limousine parts? We will show you how the genius of Gauss engineers created the LB-62, a vehicle that surpassed the T-40 tank in cross-country ability and could have replaced the entire fleet of Soviet armored cars. So why did this ideal all-terrain vehicle never enter mass production? You will discover the stroke of a pen on July 20th, 1941 that became its death sentence. Who signed the document that forced Gauss to forever forget about armored cars in favor of tanks? And how did the ideas embedded in this destroyed project secretly resurface to create the legendary BTR-40? The history of military technology holds many examples where advanced developments capable of changing the face of the Army were stopped just a step away from triumph. One of the most vivid and dramatic episodes in Soviet pre-war engineering was the fate of the LB-62 armored car. This vehicle had every chance of becoming the unified, universal scout of the Red Army, combining speed, cross-country capability, and firepower. But global historical turmoil decided otherwise. To understand why the LB-62 was so significant, we must immerse ourselves in the interwar period, when the very concept of the armored car was experiencing a deep identity crisis. In the 20s and 30s of the last century, armored cars were largely perceived as a secondary, if not languishing, type of military equipment. This state of affairs seemed strange, to say the least, especially considering the experience of World War I. During those years, wheeled combat vehicles were produced in massive numbers, and the Russian Empire, whose industry faced colossal difficulties producing tanks, demonstrated enviable success in the armored car field. Russian factories created technology that not only met, but often surpassed foreign counterparts in protection and armament. It seemed that the future of maneuver warfare belonged to wheeled armor.
However, after the global conflict ended and peace arrived, the vector of military thought shifted. The attention of generals and designers turned to tracked vehicles, and armored cars were cast into the shadows. The situation reached absurdity. Instead of developing fundamentally new designs, engineers in many countries took the path of least resistance, simply reinstalling old WW1-era armored hulls onto more modern commercial chassis. This technical cannibalism slowed progress, creating the illusion of fleet renewal without a real increase in combat effectiveness. Against this backdrop, by the mid-30s, the Soviet Union found itself in a unique, almost paradoxical situation. On one hand, the domestic automotive industry was only finding its feet and objectively lagged behind Western giants in the variety and quality of available chassis. On the other hand, the Red Army had the best situation in the world regarding the saturation of troops with armored vehicles. While European powers were limited to producing dozens or at best hundreds of such units, the USSR was counting in thousands. Soviet military doctrine, which emphasized deep offensive operations and maneuver warfare, demanded a huge number of reconnaissance assets. The most produced light armored car in the world at that time was the Soviet FAI. And in the gun-armed class, the BA-6 held the palm, soon to be replaced by the legendary BA-10. These were quite successful combat units. Yes, they couldn't boast outstanding off-road capability, being tied to the road network, and their power-to-weight ratio left much to be desired. But they possessed two undeniable advantages. They were mass-produced and technologically simple to manufacture. These machines fought successfully, accumulating invaluable operational experience in real combat conditions from Spain to the Far East. A crucial strategic nuance of the Soviet approach was the command's emphasis not on light machine gun tankettes, but on medium cannon-armed armored cars. The logic was sound. The combat effectiveness of a vehicle armed with a 45mm cannon was incomparably higher than one carrying only a rifle-caliber machine gun. The events at the Khalkhyn River vividly proved this concept's correctness. Japanese tank crews encountering Soviet BA-6s and BA-10s felt the power of their armament firsthand. Soviet armored cars operating from ambushes and using terrain features effectively hit Japanese armor, essentially acting as tank destroyers.
The success at Kholkhin inspired the military, and they eagerly awaited the next step in evolution, the heavy BA-11 armored car. This vehicle was supposed to replace the BA-10, offering even more powerful protection and firepower. However, when the BA-11 finally appeared, enthusiasm gave way to reserved skepticism. Instead of the 5 tons stipulated in the technical requirements, the machine's actual weight exceeded 8 tons. As a result, despite a more powerful engine, the power-to-weight ratio remained at the predecessor's level, and cross-country capability did not improve due to the increased ground pressure. The BA-11 was accepted into service, and a pilot batch was even produced, but it was clear to everyone, this was a development dead end. Heavy, clumsy monsters on non-all-wheel drive chassis had exhausted their potential. Simultaneously, a crisis was brewing in the light reconnaissance vehicle class. The main type of light armored car in the USSR remained the BA-20. Produced in Vixa at the Crushing and Grinding Equipment Plant, DRO, this machine was based on the GAZ M1 passenger car chassis. The BA-20 was reliable and simple, but by the end of the decade, it was hopelessly outdated. Its off-road capability was extremely limited, and the armor only protected against simple bullets. The Army needed a qualitative leap, a machine of a new generation capable of moving in formation with tanks across any terrain. And this leap became possible thanks to a revolution in Soviet engine manufacturing. In the late 30s, the Gorky automobile plant, GAZ, began mastering the production of the 6-cylinder GAZ-11 engine. This motor, a licensed copy of the American Dodge engine, became the true heart of the future victory. Its power was more than 1.5 times that of the MK engine. The appearance of such a power unit opened up horizons for designers they could only have dreamed of before. It was now possible to create an all-wheel drive chassis that wouldn't bog down under the weight of armor. The first attempt to realize this potential was the development of the LB-NATI armored car. Created at the Scientific Automobile and Tractor Institute, this machine became an important milestone, a psychological breakthrough. Firstly, it was the first domestic all-wheel drive armored car. Secondly, its protection significantly exceeded the BA-20's level. But the most important innovation was the armament. The LB-NATI was fitted with the turret from the T-40 amphibious reconnaissance tank, housing a 12.7mm DSH-K heavy machine gun paired with a DT machine gun. This combination turned the Scout into a formidable opponent for light armored vehicles and enemy manpower.
However, as is often the case with pioneers, the LB-NATI turned out to be unpolished. The designers, captivated by the idea itself, overlooked the practicalities, weight limitations, and manufacturability. The vehicle was overweight, exceeding the mass requirements by 750 kilograms. The load distribution across the axles was poor, causing the armored car to nosedive into the ground when overcoming obstacles. The hull, which inherited the complex geometry of the FAI and BA-20, was difficult to manufacture. But the main problem was the chassis. NATI had created a true Frankenstein, assembling the running gear from components and assemblies of various machines, including even the ZIS 101 luxury limousine. This approach was acceptable for a single prototype, but mass production of such a medley was out of the question. These flaws were precisely why the baton was picked up by the professionals from Gorky. The Special Design Bureau, SKB, of the Gaz Molotov plant CEO office, under the talented engineer V.A. Dedkov, took on the creation of the LB-NATI done right. The Gorky team had an ace in their sleeve that the Muscovites at NATI lacked: a systemic approach to standardization. In 1939, a prototype of the all-wheel drive GAZ 63 truck, created under the guidance of the legendary Vitaly Grachev, was already undergoing trials. This vehicle was considered a replacement for the famous Poluterka, or 1.5-ton truck.
Specifically for the needs of armored vehicle construction, a shortened chassis, indexed GAZ-62, was developed based on the GAZ-63. It became the foundation for the future legend. The technical requirements for the new armored car were signed on November 19, 1939. The military wanted a compact, all-terrain vehicle with a combat weight of around 4 tons, armament and protection similar to the LB-NATI, and a highly desirable second driving post so the vehicle could quickly exit combat in reverse without turning around. The project was designated LB-62. Work began in close cooperation with the DRO plant in Vixa, which was tasked with manufacturing the armored hulls. By mid-February 1940, the technical design was ready, and in May, the Defense Committee issued a decree ordering the production of 2 prototypes by November of the same year.
GAZ engineers approached the task creatively. In addition to the 2 prescribed vehicles, they built a third, Zero, prototype. Its hull was made of regular, non-armor steel, which significantly accelerated the process of component testing. This iron mock-up became a proving ground for finding optimal solutions. In terms of dimensions, the new LB-62 was similar to its NATI predecessor, but the internal layout was fundamentally rethought. The fighting compartment was shifted forward, improving weight distribution. The engine compartment became shorter. The hull itself received rational angles of armor plate inclination, increasing bullet resistance, but the engineers simultaneously eliminated complex curved parts, simplifying production. However, the path to metal proved thorny. Deadlines were missed due to a complex of production-related problems. The DRO plant delayed the delivery of armored hulls. Serious difficulties arose with chassis components. The production of the base GAZ-63 truck had not yet been established, and in the autumn of 1940, the GAZ engine shop, where the GAZ-11 engines were made, was suddenly repurposed for manufacturing aircraft engines. The country was frantically preparing for war in the air. Furthermore, there was a shortage of constant velocity, CV joints, critically important for front-wheel drive. Engineers had to display miracles of ingenuity, using workaround technologies and imported parts to assemble the vehicles. Despite all obstacles, in the second half of January 1941, 2 fully armored LB-62 prototypes rolled out of the shops. This delay, strangely enough, benefited the project. Engineers had time to review the running gear concept, resulting in the 2 vehicles having significant differences, allowing for a comparison of different approaches in practice. Prototype number 714 was equipped with dual tires on the rear axle, a classic solution for trucks intended to increase load capacity. This machine was longer and heavier, its mass reaching 5 tons. The second prototype, number 713, received single rear wheels with developed ground grip treads. It was lighter and more compact. The trials, which began in February 1941, were a true triumph of Soviet engineering. Nature seemed to deliberately test the new vehicle's durability. The snow depth reached 70 centimeters and temperatures dropped to -25 degrees. In these extreme conditions, the LB-62 performed superbly. Multi-kilometer marches across snow-covered highways and virgin snow revealed an astonishing picture. Both vehicles confidently maintained an average speed of about 40 kilometers per hour, accelerating up to 70 kilometers per hour on cleared sections.
But the main discovery was the cross-country capability. The armored cars confidently tackled virgin snow up to 40 centimeters deep, and even half-meter drifts were overcome, albeit with difficulty. To grasp the scale of the achievement, it is enough to say that this off-road performance was equivalent to the T-26 tracked tank and surpassed the T-40 amphibious tanks figures. Moreover, the Commission was surprised to note that the LB-62 was capable of moving through the snow on front-wheel drive alone. The ability to continue moving and exit combat on a single drive axle if the other is damaged, that is a quality whose value every frontline soldier knows.
Comparative tests revealed that vehicle number 713 with single tires had better off-road dynamics and consumed less fuel, 160 liters per 100 kilometers of virgin snow versus 230 liters for its dual-tired counterpart. Although the single-wheel sample handled worse on slippery roads, its off-road talents outweighed this drawback. The vehicle's ergonomics also earned praise. Unlike the BA-20, where the crew felt like sardines in a can, the LB-62 provided quite tolerable working conditions. The driver's position was comfortable, and fatigue on long marches was low. The radio station ensured stable communication over tens of kilometers, which was vitally important for a scout. When the trial results landed on the desk of the NIBT Proving Ground Commission in Kubinka, the military experts were somewhat confused. They had ordered a replacement for the light BA-20, but they received a universal soldier whose characteristics encroached upon the medium armored vehicle niche. In combat weight, the LB-62 caught up to the BA-10, and in terms of armor protection, it even surpassed it. The question arose, how to classify this unique hybrid? Of course, the armament of a DSHK machine gun was inferior to the BA-10's 45mm cannon in fighting tanks. But there was an important nuance here. For reconnaissance tasks, the heavy machine gun was more than enough. Furthermore, at this very moment, OKB-16 designers were finalizing the 23mm PT-23TB automatic cannon. This weapon, with its terrific rate of fire and high armor penetration, fit perfectly into the T-40 turret. With such a cannon, the LB-62 would have turned into a lethal machine capable of tearing apart any enemy light tank or armored car, let alone trucks and infantry.
In essence, Gaz had created a wheeled equivalent of the T-40 tank, only with a 3-person crew, without the ability to swim, but with better off-road capability and speed on land. Recognizing the vehicle's potential, on April 1, 1941, Defense Commissar Marshal Timoshenko put forward a revolutionary proposal to adopt the LB-62 into service immediately as a replacement for both the light BA-20 and the medium BA-10. The vehicle was indexed LB-30 in honor of Lavrenti Beria, and later BA-30. This was a bold decision aimed at fleet standardization. The production of the heavy and unsuccessful BA-11 was immediately stopped, as the Gorky Little One covered its functionality. The spring of 1941 was spent in intense work. The vehicles logged thousands of kilometers in trials, confirming the design's reliability. In Gorky, preparations for mass production were in full swing. The engine production line was being restored, the manufacture of domestic CV joints was being established, and the localization of all components was underway. It seemed that by the end of the year, the Red Army would receive hundreds, and in 1942, thousands of the newest Scout armored cars. On June 26th, already after the start of the war, a second attempt was made to approve the production plan. 500 vehicles by the end of the year. On the same day, it was decided to cease production of the T-40 tank, which freed up production capacity. The chassis issue was also being resolved. Mass production of the GAS-63 was planned for January 1942. However, the bureaucratic machine was failing. Deputy People's Commissar of Medium Machine Building, S.A. Akopov, unexpectedly spoke out against it, likely fearing disruptions to other plans amidst the chaos of the nascent war. On July 18th, a third desperate attempt was made to push for the vehicle's adoption. At the same time, Gaz designers working proactively were designing an entire family of combat vehicles based on the LB-62, an 11-man armored personnel carrier, the prototype of the future BTR-40, and an anti-aircraft self-propelled gun with automatic cannons. The platform's potential was colossal. But on July 20th, 1941, the history of the LB-62 essentially ended. On this day, the State Defense Committee signed Decree No. 222,
on the production of 10,000 light tanks. The country, which was losing thousands of combat vehicles in border battles, needed tanks. Any tanks, fast and many. The choice fell on the T-60 light tank, whose production was simpler to organize under the current conditions. The Gorky-Molotov plant received a strict order to switch to tank production. The LB-62 fell victim to force majeure circumstances. In a total war environment, logistics and standardization dictated their cruel rules. A tank, even the light T-60, with a tracked propulsion system, was perceived by the military as a more universal means of infantry support than a wheeled armored car, however perfect. The two built LB-62 prototypes served for some time longer. They were rearmed with 20mm Schwach aircraft cannons, and they likely took part in the defense of Moscow, where their traces were lost in the whirlwind of war. Nevertheless, to say the project vanished without a trace would be unfair. In the history of technology, little is ever truly lost. The LB-62 left behind a rich legacy. The experience gained in its creation, hull layout, armor angles, technological solutions, was immediately used in designing the BA-64 light armored car. This machine, which became the Red Army's eyes, is in many ways a direct ideological heir to the LB-62, albeit built on the simpler GAZ-64 chassis. But the true resurrection of the ideas embedded in the LB-62 occurred after victory. In peacetime, designers, led by the same dead cuff, returned to the 1941 developments. The GAZ-62A project, with a rear engine and powerful armament, remained on paper. But another development branch, the armored personnel carrier, bore abundant fruit. The famous BTR-40, GAZ-40, was created by the very people who designed the LB-62. If one looks at their characteristics, one can see a striking similarity in combat weight and dimensions. The BTR-40 became the embodiment of that very concept of a universal all-wheel drive armored vehicle that was born in the pre-war years but was postponed until better times. Thus, the circle of history was completed. The machine that missed the war resurrected in a new guise to serve the world for decades. This was not just a technical development, but a symbol of engineering foresight that was ahead of its time.